The sun dipped low behind the jagged remains of dead America's ruined skyline, casting long shadows across the crumbled streets. Silence settled like a heavy blanket, broken only by the occasional distant groan that reminded the small group they were far from safe. The air was thick with dust, the taste of decay, and the unspoken fear that the darkness would bring more than just night. Mara stood atop the roof of the crumbled gas station, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. She adjusted the strap of the battered backpack slung over her shoulder, the worn leather creaking as she moved. Her heart pounded with the weight of responsibility, not just for herself, but for the 4 others who had trusted her to lead them through this nightmare. Her voice, steady but low, carried across the empty street below. "We can't stay here much longer. The supplies are almost gone. And the undead, they're getting bolder every night." She glanced down at Jonas, who was crouched by the door, nervously loading his shotgun. Jonas gave a curt nod. His broad frame tensed, muscles ready for a fight. "I've seen groups pass through here before, dead before sundown. If we don't move, we're next." From the shadows near the abandoned storefront, Lena wrapped her thin arms around herself, shivering despite the warm air. Her eyes flicked nervously to the dark alley beside them. "There's talk. A place. Somewhere east, past the ruins of the city. They say it's safe. Walls still stand, and people live there without looking over their shoulders." Mara's gaze darkened. The stories had circulated for months, half whispers, half desperate hope. Safe place. That's what we need. But how do we know it's real? It could be a trap. Or worse, already overrun. Tomas, the youngest of the group, shifted uneasily. His fingers fidgeted with the strap of his backpack, worn thin from constant use. "We can't stay. Not here. Not with the nights getting colder, and the dead getting louder." His voice cracked, betraying the fear he tried to hide. From the corner, Elijah, the quietest but sharpest among them, stepped forward. His gaze was steady, calculating. "We don't have a choice. If we wait too long, we'll be trapped here when the horde finds us. I've been listening on the radio, faint signals, but one stood out. Coordinates. Somewhere far, but possibly our best chance." Mara nodded, her mind racing. Leaving meant stepping into the unknown, risking everything on a rumor and a handful of coordinates. Staying meant certain death. The night deepened, swallowing the ruins in darkness, and with it, the fragile safety they clung to. "We leave at dawn," Mara said finally, her voice firm. "Pack what you can carry. No unnecessary risks. We move fast and stay quiet. If any of you can't handle it, say it now." Silence answered her. The group dispersed to gather their scant belongings, the sound of rustling plastic and clinking metal filling the empty streets. Alone for a moment, Mara let her gaze fall on the remnants of the world she once knew. Broken windows, rusted cars, cracked pavement overtaken by weeds. It was hard to remember a time before the darkness, before friends, family, and strangers alike turned into monsters roaming these streets. Her thoughts drifted to her brother, lost months ago in the chaos. The ache in her chest tightened. She shoved the pain aside. Survival demanded focus. Hope demanded courage. As night settled fully, the first sounds of the undead stirring filled the air. Groans, scraping claws against concrete, faint shuffles coming closer. Mara climbed back down, rallying the group near the boarded-up storefront that was their temporary shelter. Jonas took point, scanning ahead as they moved in single file through the twisting alleys. The moon, hidden behind thick clouds, offered little light. Every shadow seemed alive. Every whisper of wind carried threats. Lena stumbled, catching herself against a wall. "Did you hear that?" Elijah held up a hand, signaling silence. Ahead, a low, guttural growl echoed off the empty buildings. A pack of undead, hunting. The group froze, hearts pounding. Mara's grip tightened on her makeshift spear, a sharpened metal rod she'd found in the wreckage. "Slow. Steady. Don't make a sound. We circle around, avoid the street." Their footsteps fell lighter, careful, as they navigated the maze of debris and dead ends. The pack passed just yards away, eyes glowing faintly in the gloom, hungry and relentless. When the last moan faded, relief was brief. Mara's mind raced. This was only the beginning. The journey ahead would test everything they had. Trust, strength, and the very will to live. By the time dawn cracked through the cracked windows of their shelter, the group was packed, exhausted, but ready. Tomas looked to Mara, voice barely a whisper. "Do you really think we'll find that safe place?" Mara met his gaze, the faintest hint of a smile touching her lips. "I don't know. But if we don't try, we're already dead." As the first rays of sun broke over the horizon, they stepped into the uncertain light, leaving the ruins of their past behind and walking straight into the dark unknown of dead America. Would you like me to continue with part 2 next? Or want me to adjust anything? The sun disappeared behind jagged ruins, and dead America's darkness fell like a shroud over the landscape. Mara led the group cautiously down the cracked highway, their footsteps muffled by the broken asphalt and overgrown weeds. Every rustle of the dry brush and distant moan made their hearts jump. The air was thick with tension. They knew the undead were watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. Jonas brought up the rear, eyes constantly scanning for threats. His shotgun hung ready, a grim reminder that this journey was as much a fight as a flight. "Keep close," he muttered. "One mistake and we're done." Lena tightened the straps on her pack, the weight of their meager supplies pulling at her shoulders. "How far do you think this place is?" she asked quietly, glancing at Mara. "Too far for one day's walk," Mara answered without looking back. "But we have no choice. We either move or die here." Tomas stumbled over a pile of rubble, catching himself on a rusted car door. His breath came in sharp bursts. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted, voice trembling. Elijah, silent until now, paused and turned to face Tomas. "None of us are. But fear can kill you faster than the undead. Focus." The group moved on, every shadow a potential threat. Mara's mind flickered back to the radio transmission Elijah had caught, a faint signal promising sanctuary, hope in the endless night. That hope was the only thing driving them forward. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the silence, a metallic clang echoing from the side alley. The group froze, eyes wide. Jonas raised a shotgun, scanning the darkness. "Stay sharp," Mara whispered. From the shadows, a figure emerged, gaunt, ragged, but unmistakably human. The stranger's eyes darted nervously before settling on the group. "Wait. Please, I don't want trouble," the man said hurriedly. Mara stepped forward, spear raised but ready to lower it. "Who are you? How do we know you're not one of them?" The man swallowed hard. "Name's Gabe. I've been wandering for weeks, trying to find the safe place. Heard about your group on the radio." Lena looked skeptical. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I have information," Gabe replied, voice low. "There's a roadblock ahead, burned cars, barricades. It's not just undead out there. People. Hostiles. And they don't want anyone passing." Mara exchanged glances with Elijah and Jonas. This was no longer just a fight against the undead. Humans could be just as dangerous. "We need to move," Mara said. "Tomorrow, before nightfall." The group settled for the night in the remains of a shuttered grocery store. Inside, the stale air mixed with the scent of rotting food and dust. They huddled around a small fire, its glow fragile against the encroaching dark. Tomas sat apart, staring at the flickering flames. "I lost my family," he said softly. "They didn't make it." Lena reached out, resting a hand on his arm. "We all lost someone. That's why we keep going. Because if we don't, then what's left?" Jonas cleaned his shotgun methodically, breaking the silence. "Every step we take out here could be our last. We can't afford mistakes." Suddenly, a chilling sound pierced the night, a guttural growl from just outside. The group froze, hearts pounding. The undead were near. Mara stood, spear ready. "Stay quiet. Stay still." The growl grew louder, followed by shuffling footsteps. Through the cracked windows, pale eyes reflected the firelight. 1, 2, then a small group of undead shuffled closer. Elijah whispered, "They're circling." The group held their breath as the creatures moved around the building, searching, sniffing, but unable to get inside. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the growls faded. Mara let out a slow breath. "That's just a warning. There are more. Always more." The fire flickered low, and exhaustion pulled at their limbs. Yet sleep was impossible. The darkness outside was filled with horrors unseen, and the weight of their mission pressed down on each of them. Before dawn, the group prepared to move again. Gabe shared what he knew about the barricade, a trap laid by desperate survivors willing to kill anyone who threatened their claim. Mara's jaw tightened. "We don't have a choice. We either fight or die trying." As they stepped into the first gray light of dawn, the survivors felt the fragile thread of hope stretch taut. Ahead lay danger, uncertainty, and the chance for a future worth fighting for. The morning fog clung to the cracked pavement like a shroud as Mara's group approached the outskirts of the barricade Gabe had warned them about. Charred remnants of burned-out vehicles lay twisted across the road, their blackened frames reaching up like skeletal hands. Makeshift barricades of metal sheets and wooden pallets created a jagged wall, marking the boundary between the world they knew and the uncertain ground ahead. Mara studied the barricade carefully. "This isn't just to keep the undead out," she muttered. "Someone wants to keep people like us from passing." Jonas nodded grimly. "We're walking into a trap." The group crouched behind a crumbling wall, eyes scanning for movement. Gabe pointed toward a guard post perched above the barricade, a lone figure, heavily armed, watching. Lena swallowed hard. "What do we do? We can't just walk in." Mara's eyes flicked to Tomas, who shifted nervously. "We'll try to sneak past, find a weak point. We don't have the firepower for a fight." Elijah produced a small map, tracing a route around the back of the barricade. "There's a service tunnel nearby. It might be our best chance." As they moved cautiously through the thick underbrush, the eerie silence was shattered by a sudden, desperate scream. Tomas froze. That sounded like Jonas. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. They broke into a run, racing back toward the barricade's front. Smoke curled from the ruins, and chaos reigned. Jonas was nowhere in sight. "Elijah, where's Jonas?" Mara demanded, panic creeping into her voice. Elijah shook his head, eyes wide. "I don't know. He was covering us, then, nothing." Lena's face paled. "He could be trapped. Or worse." The group gathered, torn between staying to search or pushing forward. Gabe stepped forward, voice low. "We can't leave him. Not like this." Mara's breath hitched. Leaving a member behind was unthinkable, but stopping meant risking them all. "We split," Mara decided swiftly. "Two of us search for Jonas, the rest continue toward the safe place." Tomas volunteered immediately, determination overcoming fear. "I'm coming." The two slipped into the ruined streets, calling out Jonas' name. Their voices echoed off broken walls. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours. The sun dipped low again, and the shadows grew long and threatening. Then, from the corner of an abandoned bookstore, a sudden rustle. Mara and Tomas froze. A figure emerged, gaunt, filthy, but unmistakably alive. It was Jonas, but something was wrong. His eyes were wild, haunted. His breath came in ragged gasps. "Jonas!" Mara cried. He stumbled toward them, a look of confusion and fear clouding his face. "What happened?" Tomas asked urgently. Jonas shook his head, struggling to speak. I got lost. Heard something, someone, down in the tunnels. I followed. Got trapped. The dark, it's alive." Mara's stomach churned. "We don't have time for ghosts. We have to move." Jonas looked past them, his gaze distant. "It's not just the undead out here. There's something worse. Something waiting. Back at the barricade, the rest of the group waited anxiously. Gabe paced, eyes flicking toward every shadow. When Mara, Tomas, and Jonas finally returned, relief flooded the air. But the mood was tense. The night was closing in fast, and the dangers ahead were growing. That evening, as they huddled near a flickering fire, Mara noticed Jonas' restless movements. He stared into the flames, muttering to himself. Lena leaned close. "Jonas, you're scaring us. What's going on?" Jonas shook his head again. "I saw things down there. Shadows moving where there shouldn't be any. Whispers that promised safety if I just stayed, but it was a trap." Elijah frowned. "Sounds like exhaustion. We've all seen things in the dark." Jonas' eyes flickered with something else, fear, or something deeper. "No. It's real. The darkness is alive. And it's coming for us." Mara's jaw clenched. Whether it was Jonas' mind unraveling or something else, she knew one thing: the journey would test not just their bodies, but their minds and spirits. Before dawn, they packed up again. The safe place was still out there, somewhere beyond the darkness. And no matter what waited, they would face it together. "Would you like me to write part 4 now?" The group moved under the heavy cloak of night, shadows their only cover as they skirted the barricade. The map Elijah held was worn and creased, the path faint but promising. Every step deeper into the darkness was a gamble. Every breath, a whisper of hope and dread. Jonas stayed close to Mara, his eyes darting nervously into every shadow. The things he claimed to have seen haunted him, and that fear rippled through the group like a silent contagion. Mara's grip tightened on her spear. Whatever lay ahead was waiting, not just the undead, but something more sinister lurking in the echoes of the dark. They reached the service tunnel Elijah had marked. The entrance was half collapsed, but wide enough to squeeze through. The air inside was cold and stale, thick with the smell of mold and rot. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow corridor, a hollow reminder that they were alone, yet never truly alone. Lena shivered as she pulled her jacket tighter. "How far does this tunnel go?" "Elijah says it leads under the barricade, out the other side," Mara whispered. "We have to trust it." The tunnel was pitch black, forcing them to move slowly, guided by the faint beam of Mara's flashlight. Each drip of water, each scrape of their footsteps against the concrete walls, seemed amplified, filling the silence with an unsettling rhythm. Suddenly, a low noise emerged, a wet, dragging sound that made their blood run cold. "What was that?" Tomas whispered, voice shaking. Jonas held up a hand, signaling silence. The sound grew louder, closer. From the darkness ahead, a figure emerged, a twisted shadow with gnarled limbs and hollow eyes glowing faintly in the beam. A walker. It lunged. Mara reacted instantly, jabbing her spear into the creature's chest. It screamed, a gurgling, guttural sound, and collapsed. "Keep moving," Mara hissed. They pressed on, heartbeats pounding, senses screaming. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them into single file. Every corner hid potential death. Then, an eerie whisper floated through the stale air, soft, unintelligible, but unmistakably human. "Elijah," Mara called, "did you hear that?" He nodded, eyes wide. Voices. "Someone's down here with us." Panic gripped the group. Were they walking into a trap? Or were other survivors trapped in the darkness? They followed the whispers, deeper into the tunnel's bowels, until the passage opened into a forgotten subway station, graffiti-stained walls, flickering lights overhead, and a platform covered in debris. There, crouched in the shadows, was a woman. Her eyes flicked up, wary but desperate. "Please," she whispered. "Help me." Mara stepped forward slowly. "Who are you? What happened here?" The woman's lips trembled. "Name's Rachel. I was with a group. We tried to get through the barricade but got separated. The others, they didn't make it." Lena reached out, offering water. Rachel accepted with a grateful nod. "Why didn't you come with us earlier?" Mara asked. Rachel's gaze darkened. Because of them. The people guarding the barricade, they're not just killers. They're something else. Cultists, maybe. They believe the darkness cleanses everything. Anyone who tries to leave, they disappear. A cold shiver ran down Mara's spine. This journey was more dangerous than she had imagined. We have to move, Mara said. Together. Rachel nodded, rising. I know another way out, but it's riskier. The group shared tense glances. Risk was all they had. They gathered what little they had and pressed forward, deeper into the forgotten tunnels. The whispers grew louder, turning into chilling voices that echoed off the walls, promising safety but delivering only fear. Suddenly, a distant scream ripped through the station. Run! Mara shouted. The group sprinted, dodging fallen beams and debris, the air thick with the stench of death. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit, both undead and something far worse, closed in. Bursting through a rusted door, they emerged into the cold night air on the far side of the barricade. For a moment, they stood frozen, gasping, the silence heavy but alive with danger. Jonas stared into the darkness beyond, voice barely audible. We made it, but at what cost? Mara's eyes scanned the horizon, where faint lights flickered in the distance, possibly their hope, or the next nightmare. We keep moving, she said, voice steady. No turning back now. The darkness behind them swallowed the past, and the unknown stretched out ahead, waiting to test their courage, their trust, and their very will to survive. Ready for part 5? A crackling fire cast long shadows against the jagged rocks as the group huddled around the small flame, their breath visible in the cold night air. The flickering light offered little warmth, but it was something. After escaping the tunnel, they had walked for hours in silence, every creak and howl of the wind keeping them on edge. Mara sat apart from the others, sharpening her spear and watching the trees sway in the distance. The horizon was dark, broken only by the faint, pulsing glow of something far away, perhaps a town, perhaps a trap. Whatever that light is, Gabe said, approaching her, it's our next move. Mara nodded slowly. We can't keep wandering. Supplies are low. People are tired. And Jonas, her voice trailed off as she looked toward him. Jonas sat by the fire, rocking slightly, his face pale and eyes bloodshot. He hadn't said much since the tunnels. Every so often, he whispered something unintelligible to himself and stared into the dark. Elijah joined them, crouching beside Gabe. I've been thinking. Rachel showing up like that? Too convenient. She's been helpful, Lena interjected from behind them, her arms crossed. Without her, we wouldn't have gotten out. She knew those tunnels too well, Elijah said. Too calm, too quiet. Mara raised her hand. Enough. We're not turning on each other. Not out here. They returned to the fire in silence, but suspicion had already begun to take root. Later that night, Rachel offered to take first watch. Mara hesitated but agreed. She needed rest, even if sleep meant nightmares. The others curled up beneath torn blankets and tarps, leaving Rachel sitting alone, her back to the fire and eyes scanning the treeline. An hour passed before Gabe stirred, something gnawing at his instincts. He sat up quietly and looked around. Rachel was gone. Rachel, he whispered. No response. He nudged Mara awake. She's gone. Mara shot up, already gripping her spear. Lena, Tomas, wake up. She's not here. Elijah rubbed his eyes, groggy. Maybe she just stepped away. Shoo! Mara cut him off. In the distance, leaves rustled. Not the wind. Footsteps. They crouched low, hearts racing. A voice broke the stillness. You weren't supposed to come this far. Rachel. Mara stood slowly, stepping into the dark. The others followed quietly behind, weapons ready. Rachel emerged from behind a tree, flanked by two men dressed in mismatched armor, their faces obscured by masks made of cloth and bone. They carried modified rifles and jagged blades. I didn't want it to end this way, Rachel said softly, not looking them in the eye. But you weren't supposed to survive the tunnels. Tomas stepped forward. You led us into a trap? Rachel looked ashamed. I was trying to spare you. The people I'm with, they believe survivors should be purified. Only those chosen by the darkness get to live in the light. You've lost your mind, Lena snapped. No, Rachel said, almost pleading. You don't understand. The place we're going, it's not safety. It's control. Submission. They call it haven, but it's a cage. I was trying to warn you. I just couldn't go through with it. The two masked men raised their weapons. Mara's voice turned to steel. Then why lead us here? I was told to bring you in, Rachel admitted. But I couldn't. I wanted you to know the truth first. To choose. Gabe stepped forward. Our choice is to fight. Before Rachel could respond, Elijah hurled a rock into the trees. The distraction was enough. Mara lunged. In a flurry of motion, weapons clashed. The fire's glow barely illuminated the chaos, but the survivors moved with desperation. Tomas tackled one of the masked men, knocking his weapon away. Elijah wrestled with the second, driving a metal pipe into his side. Mara had Rachel pinned, the point of her spear inches from her throat. Rachel didn't resist. Do it, she whispered. Mara's hand trembled. You tried to kill us. I tried to save you, in my own way. In the end, Mara lowered her weapon. You don't get to decide what survival looks like. The masked men were unconscious. The group tied them with ropes scavenged from Gabe's pack. Dawn crept over the horizon as they sat in silence, bruised and bleeding. Mara looked at Rachel. You're coming with us. But not as one of us. Rachel nodded. I understand. Elijah turned his eyes to the distant lights. So, what now? We go to Haven, Mara said, her voice steady. If it's what she says it is, we'll tear it down from the inside. Lena looked at her with quiet admiration. And if it's worse? Then we burn it to the ground. In the firelight's dying embers, they made a silent vow, no matter what waited in the heart of dead America, they would face it as one. Together. Would you like me to continue with part 6? The road twisted through a ravaged forest, bare of life and full of forgotten death. Burned-out cars dotted the cracked pavement, rusted reminders of a world that once fled in panic. The group moved with caution, every step closer to Haven dragging a storm of questions behind them. No one spoke much. Trust had become fragile. Rachel walked behind Mara, silent, her wrists bound loosely, more symbolic than secure. She had saved them in the end, sort of. But betrayal still lingered like smoke on the air. Tomas was the first to break the silence. We keep heading east. You said Haven's in an old military complex? Rachel nodded. It was once Fort Marlowe. Reinforced, self-sustaining. They use the name Haven now to lure people in. Jonas snorted. And then what? Cleanse us? Lock us up? Kill us? Rachel didn't answer. Jonas stopped walking. You were one of them. How many did you help bring there? Mara held up a hand. Enough. Jonas glared. She's dangerous. And so are we, Mara said evenly. But we're still breathing, and until Haven shows us its teeth, we keep moving. They resumed their march. Hours passed, the terrain growing more hostile, dense with brambles, blocked by fallen trees and twisted metal. They saw signs now, makeshift arrows carved into tree bark, old government warning signs defaced with strange symbols. Cult graffiti. Circles crossed with slashes, painted in dried blood. We're close, Rachel said quietly. Once we cross the river, it's only a few miles out. That's when they heard it, gunfire. Not far. The group dropped into a crouch instinctively. Military? Elijah whispered. Could be patrols, Rachel said. Or worse. Haven sends out reapers, cleansing squads. They don't take prisoners. A scream followed the shots. Without waiting, Mara sprinted toward the sound, the others racing behind her. They reached a clearing near the river where a small group of survivors were pinned behind an overturned jeep. 3 armed figures in patchwork black armor were advancing on them with cold precision, rifles barking, each step measured like they had no fear. "Cover them!" Mara shouted. Tomas and Gabe flanked left. Lena and Elijah circled right. Mara raised her spear, eyes locked on the nearest attacker. Jonas, for once, didn't hesitate, he charged. Chaos erupted. A shot grazed Gabe's arm, but he kept firing. Tomas managed to knock one Reaper down with a thrown rock, then finished the job with a crowbar to the skull. Lena tackled another, wrenching the rifle from his hands before plunging her knife into his chest. Mara faced the third alone. He was faster, stronger, clearly enhanced or trained. But Mara moved with desperation and fury. They clashed in a brutal dance, metal striking metal until Mara drove her spear through his side. He crumpled with a gasp. Silence fell. The pinned survivors, 3 women and a boy, stared in disbelief. "You're not with Haven," one of the women said, still clutching a bloodied hatchet. "No," Mara replied. "But we're going there." The woman looked horrified. "You don't want to. They'll turn you into one of them. If you resist, they'll feed you to the pit." Elijah stepped forward. "The pit? Where they throw the unworthy," she said. "The infected. The broken. And worse." Rachel looked away. Mara helped her to her feet. "We've come too far to run now. If there's even a chance others are trapped in there, we have to try." The new survivors introduced themselves: Kayla, a medic; Danny, a former police officer; June, a sharp-eyed woman who rarely spoke; and Milo, the boy, no older than 11, but already carrying the weight of survival in his eyes. Together, they crossed the river using a fallen bridge. On the far side, Haven loomed. From the treeline, it looked like salvation: tall fences topped with barbed wire, solar panels gleaming in the fading sun, and a large tower at its center broadcasting a repeating signal. Elijah listened to the transmission through a salvaged radio. "It's just one word over and over. Sanctuary." "It's a lie," Rachel said. "They lure in the desperate." "And they found us," Mara said. As night fell, they set up camp a safe distance away, hidden in the ruins of an old ranger station. Fires were forbidden now. The light might draw Haven's gaze. But the darkness had its own horrors. Jonas couldn't sleep. He sat watch with Mara, staring at the towering silhouette of the complex ahead. "You think we're ready for this?" he asked. "No," she replied honestly. "But the people inside? They don't get to choose." "We do." He nodded slowly. "Then let's tear down the lie." Mara watched the walls of Haven, knowing the real war was about to begin, not just against the undead or the fanatics, but for the soul of survival itself. "Let me know when you're ready for Part 7. Dawn came like a cold whisper across the ruined earth. Mist clung to the ground as if the dead themselves were watching from the shadows. Haven loomed in the distance, still, quiet, and fortified like a beast at rest. But inside, Rachel warned, it was anything but peaceful. They moved before sunrise. No words. Just eyes locked, weapons gripped, and the sound of boots crunching through wet grass. Rachel led them to a service tunnel hidden behind a collapsed section of the perimeter fence, overgrown and forgotten. "They don't guard it," she whispered. "They think it's sealed from the inside." Mara nodded once, and Gabe pried the rusted gate open with a crowbar. The tunnel reeked of mold and rot. A rat skittered past them into the dark. "We move quick," Mara said. "Stay silent. If things go bad, we split into 2 teams, rescue and disrupt." Inside, the tunnel stretched like the throat of a beast, narrow and claustrophobic. Pipes leaked overhead. Somewhere deeper, a mechanical hum echoed, the sound of power, control, and the false promise of safety. They emerged into a maintenance room filled with old tools and shelves of dusty supplies. Rachel checked the hatch on the far wall. This leads into the lower housing block. Mostly empty. If we're lucky. They climbed through the narrow opening and stepped into a hallway lit with flickering LED panels. Surveillance cameras blinked above, but most were dead or covered in grime. This place had been running on scraps for too long. The hallway opened into a central dormitory, rows of metal bunks, most empty, others filled with pale, hollow-eyed people who barely looked human. A few stirred when the group entered, but no one spoke. It was as if hope had been drained from the air itself. Kayla moved to help a woman lying on the floor, her arm twisted unnaturally. "She's been untreated for days," Kayla whispered. "No one's come for her." Milo tugged on Mara's sleeve, pointing to a large poster on the far wall. It read, "Obedience is freedom. Dissent is infection." "Welcome to Haven," Rachel said bitterly. Suddenly, an alarm blared, shrill, piercing, and loud enough to wake the dead. Someone tripped a motion sensor. Lena shouted. Within seconds, a voice echoed over loudspeakers, "Unregistered presence detected in Block 9. All enforcers respond." Mara didn't wait. "We split. Kayla, take the wounded and Milo, find somewhere safe and quiet. Tomas, Elijah, Lena, you're with me. We find the central control. We shut this down from inside." "And me?" Jonas asked, already cocking his shotgun. "You're with Rachel. Find where they're keeping the others. Break them out." Jonas smiled grimly. "Thought you'd never ask." They scattered like shadows. Mara's team moved through back corridors, using the schematics Rachel had drawn in the dirt the night before. Past an abandoned dining hall and a room stacked with crates labeled purification supplies, they reached the heart of Haven, an iron door with biometric locks. Gabe stepped forward with a grin and pulled out the severed hand of one of the Reapers they'd killed earlier. Crude, but effective. He pressed it to the scanner. A green light flashed. The door hissed open. Inside, the command center was a mix of military tech and repurposed junk. Screens flickered with camera feeds. A map of the region pulsed with red dots, other survivor groups being tracked in real time. Lena gasped. "They've been watching everyone. And hunting them," Mara added. "This isn't just a refuge. It's a trap network." Suddenly, armed guards burst into the room, heavily armored, faces covered, rifles aimed. Down. They dropped fast, returning fire. Sparks flew. Lena ducked behind a console. Elijah pulled the pin on a smoke grenade and rolled it across the floor. White fog swallowed the room. In the chaos, Mara lunged toward the central console, ripping open a panel and jamming a crowbar into the wiring. Electricity arced. Alarms died. Screens blinked out. The facility went dark. Somewhere nearby, Jonas and Rachel kicked open a locked door. Inside, over a dozen prisoners sat shackled and broken. "Time to go," Jonas growled. The prisoners blinked in confusion. Are you here to save us?" "No," Rachel said. "We're here to set you free." Back in the control room, the fog cleared. 2 guards were down. 1 fled. Mara looked at the static-filled monitors. "We've crippled them. But we're not finished." She pressed the intercom button. "To everyone in Haven, the lie is over. You are not property. You are not infected for thinking differently. The gates will be opened. Run. Fight. Live." Kayla's voice crackled over the radio. "We're ready. People are moving. We've started something." Mara smiled. "Then let's finish it." Outside, sirens wailed. But this time, it wasn't the sound of control, it was the sound of collapse. Ready for Part 8, The Fall of Haven? The gates of Haven stood tall, reinforced steel layered over concrete, meant to keep danger out and control in. But now, they were trembling. Mara stood atop the outer wall, wind whipping her jacket, smoke curling from the chaos below. The uprising had begun. Within the compound, prisoners broke their chains. Survivors armed themselves with anything they could find, pipes, shovels, even broken pieces of metal fencing. The system that once ruled them with silence now echoed with screams of rebellion. "We opened the armory," Rachel said, stepping beside Mara. "They're fighting back." Mara's eyes scanned the chaos. "Good. But we're not done yet." In the distance, a deep groan rumbled. Gabe looked up, uneasy. "That's not thunder." It wasn't. From the northern breach, a wall section weakened by time and weather, a mass of bodies spilled like water through a crack. Not soldiers. Not survivors. Zombies. Hundreds of them. "What the hell?" Tomas shouted. "Where did they come from?" "They follow the noise," Lena said. "All of it, the alarms, the gunfire, we brought the storm." Mara turned to Rachel. "Did you know they were close?" Rachel shook her head. "They were always circling, but this is a horde." "We just turned a prison into a killing ground," Jonas said bitterly. Mara gritted her teeth. "Then we make sure we're not the ones buried in it." She grabbed the nearest radio. "To all survivors inside Haven, fall back to the southern corridor." "Repeat, fall back and escape through the southern corridor." Through the smog and the strobe of red warning lights, groups began shifting, wounded helped by stronger hands, former prisoners now defenders. Zombies flooded the northern courtyard, snarling and thrashing, drawn to movement. A man tripped, screaming as he was dragged into the mob. Blood sprayed across the pavement. "We have to bottleneck them," Elijah said, holding a detonator. "We plant charges at the inner hallway. Collapse it. Cut them off." "You'll trap people inside," Lena said. He hesitated. "Then buy me time to get everyone through." Jonas didn't wait. "Come on then. You want to play hero, you don't go alone." The two men sprinted into the burning ruins, dodging debris and fallen bodies, weaving through the chaos toward the structural choke point. Meanwhile, Kayla led survivors through a cracked tunnel, small, tight, but unguarded. Milo held her hand, face pale but determined. Behind them, Kayla could hear the dead howling louder. Back at the control room, Mara and Rachel worked the remaining systems. The cameras were down, but manual override still functioned. With a few button presses, the outer gates creaked open just enough. "Freedom's that way," Mara muttered. "If they can reach it." Rachel glanced at her. "You know this place can't stand." "It's not supposed to," Mara replied. "It was never a home." Then the ground shook. A sharp boom echoed. Dust fell from the ceiling. Elijah's voice crackled over the radio. "Charges planted. We're clear." "Do it," Mara ordered. A thunderous blast tore through the northern sector. The horde collapsed with the structure, crushed beneath twisted steel and flame. Screams, human and inhuman, pierced the night before silence returned. The wall had held. Barely. Hours later, the smoke cleared. Where once stood Haven's mighty towers and false promises, now lay a broken wasteland of steel and ash. Survivors trickled out into the open world, blinking under the early light of dawn. Some wept. Some dropped to their knees in disbelief. Mara stood at the ridge outside the ruins, watching the sun rise over the wreckage. Rachel joined her, arms crossed. "It's gone," Rachel said. "Everything they built." "Everything they twisted," Mara corrected. "We didn't destroy hope. We freed it." Lena stepped up beside them, blood smeared across her cheek but her eyes sharp. "We saved over 80 people," she said. "More could have made it." "We did what we could," Mara replied. "And we're not done." Gabe tossed a water bottle to Jonas, who caught it with one hand. "So, what now? Where do we take all these people?" Mara turned, looking out across the open road. "We build something better," she said simply. "No walls. No chains. No lies." Kayla stood with Milo, gently bandaging his scraped hand. "Do we have a name for it?" the boy asked. Mara smiled faintly. Not yet. He looked toward the horizon. Then maybe we just call it home. The group moved forward, slow but steady. No marching orders, no sirens, no fear of punishment. Just footsteps, human and free, fading into the rising light of a world trying to remember what it meant to live. As they disappeared into the morning haze, the ruins of Haven smoldered behind them. A monument to what they'd survived. And a warning to any who tried to cage hope again in dead America. Story complete. Let me know if you'd like a cinematic summary, character art prompts, or the full audiobook narration script formatting.